Welcome to Downtown Spaces, El Paso's newest and largest co-working space located right here in downtown El Paso. Downtown Spaces offers 24,000 square feet of office space, so there is a space for businesses of every size. Choose a cozy seat in any of our shared spaces, or work from a dedicated desk where you're guaranteed a spot to plug in and get to work. Looking for more privacy like a private office or suite? We've got options. Create the space to make it your own. All of our memberships come with access to all of our amenities, like our conference rooms, our podcast and photography studio, business class printers, high-speed internet, concierge services, daily deep cleaning, modern decor and furniture, mail services, free downtown parking, and access to exclusive networking events and panel discussions. Our space is your space. Downtown Spaces. Love where you work. October panel discussion, Expanding Your Brand Through Podcasting. My name is Katie Scott, and I will be moderating tonight's discussion. Due to COVID-19 city regulations prohibiting large gatherings, we are streaming this month's panel discussion to you right here, live from Downtown Spaces. We hope everyone is staying healthy and safe during this time, and we look forward to once again hosting our monthly panel discussions back here at Downtown Spaces. For tonight's panel discussion, we will hear from 4 El Paso leaders who have successful podcasts. We will hear about how each of these El Paso leaders expanded their personal and business brand through podcasting. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists. His podcast was recently named #1 podcast of 2020 by New York Weekly. The podcast delves into corporatepreneur and how to achieve success and happiness through work and life. He has interviewed such guests like Domi Shi, Academy Award-winning director for Disney Pixar's Bao, businessman, influencer, and entrepreneur David Meltzer, to Grammy-nominated and multi-platinum producer artist Clinton Sparks. He is known as Panda to the world. Let's meet David Chen.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You know his voice, his radio personality is no stranger to the mic. He has years of experience in the radio and podcast industry. He has interviewed El Paso legends like former WWE superstar Vicky Guerrero, former news personality Felipe Solis, and has just released an episode today with legendary club owner Joe Dorgan. See what's happening around the Sun City on his popular podcast, Stayed Tuned El Paso with Priss and Vic. None other than Victor Cruz.
I've done all that. Wow. Sounds like a cool dude. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
She is the co-host to the newest and upcoming podcast, the Vino and Rae Show, and is sister to NFL athletes Aaron and Alvin Jones. You won't want to miss an episode of this brother-sister duo discussing pop culture, trends, hot topics, and life. It's guaranteed to have you laughing and tuning in for more. We are excited to introduce the one who's holding it all together, Rae Walker.
Hi, guys. How you doing? Thanks for having me, Katie.
Thanks for coming. He is the former KLAQ radio producer and former host on AM 600 sports talk show Crunch Time. He has done it all from production to on-air talent. You can catch him on El Paso's newest Friday Night Football live talk show from the Herald Post End Zone, discussing game highlights and score updates. It's a pleasure to introduce Mando, the Monster Medina.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much. What an honor to be here.
Thank you all for joining us tonight. Every day, more and more businesses are launching podcasts as a powerful way to reach their customers. Not only is it easy and free to make a podcast through platforms like Anchor, it's an ongoing opportunity to connect with your audience, personalize your brand, and grow your business. Your podcast has huge potential for reaching new customers. And on top of that, your podcast is an own channel where you can control your brand's message and position your business in the most strategic light. When listeners subscribe to your podcast, they are opting to hear from you on a regular basis. And by starting a podcast and releasing episodes on a consistent schedule, you can stay on top of your customers' minds and stand out from the competition, building a level of brand loyalty that deepens over time. David, let's get started off with you. New York Weekly just named your podcast, Pandonomics, #1 podcast for 2020. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Your podcast ranked on top of a list of celebrity names like Joe Rogan, Gary Vee, and Tony Robbins. Spotify recently reported an exclusive $100 million deal with Joe Rogan. His podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, will become exclusive to Spotify by the end of 2020. How does it feel to have your podcast, Pandonomics, be on top of a list of names that were some of the first to inspire podcast use?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It was pretty uncomfortable when I first heard about it, and I say that humbly because the people that have been on the podcast stage, Gary is a friend, Tony Robbins, Joe Rogan. These are amazing personalities and human beings. I remember when I first got the information that I was gonna be in 2020 on as far as top 15. I have a weekly Thursday mentee podcast that I talk to everybody, and I said, "Oh, we made it top 15," and not realizing that we were placed where we were placed. So when I got to third and I saw Joe Rogan, I immediately started getting butterflies and didn't want to post anything up because these are so amazing. And then when I started going down the list and saw the rest of the people 6 days later, because that's how uncomfortable it was an amazing thing because for me, during the pandemic and how difficult this is, and coming from the city of El Paso, 915 we're all proud of, I think it definitely shows that you can compete with bigger people and bigger audiences, no matter what your platform is, no matter where you're from. We now have the ability to do so. So doing something positive and impactful was really just an honor and a blessing, and just to be even part of this panel, much less the people that were there on the 2020 New York Weekly, really kind of took me back and really made me feel that this is why we do what we do, because we can help the community and help grow everyone else and talk about our wonderful city. So it was an amazing feeling.
Now, you just released your 37th episode, and your last guest you had on your show was acclaimed artist and director Domi Shi. She is a Chinese-born Canadian storyboard artist and first woman to direct a short film for Pixar. She has worked on many notable films like Inside Out, Incredibles 2, and Toy Story 4. And she was also the director and creator of the film Bao. David, how do you meet such admirable people, and how do you build that relationship to feel comfortable enough to ask them to be a guest on your show?
I mean, for my podcast, it's really about personal relationships and personal branding and dealing with people on a very personal level. And I've been very fortunate to meet a lot of great individuals in my life who've inspired me and made me want to be a better person and a better business person as well. With Domi, it was kind of one of those things where when I first saw the movie Bao, it was like everybody in the world was like, David, this is a show that you have to watch because it's about you and your life and everyone around you, and it's literally about you. And I thought it was funny. And when I first saw this movie, I start crying because I'm like, this is really, lifelike. This is really how my mother feels. This is how things are going. And what was amazing was I just followed her on Instagram. And what really happened with her in particular, she was doing a auction where she was doing original artwork, and I just bid it on the artwork and won it because it was going to donation. And that piece meant so much to me that I actually ended up giving it to my mother because it meant the world to me. And we became friends from that. We just started talking to each other back and forth on social media. And eventually I just asked her to be part of my podcast because she saw what I was doing on social media. I saw what she was doing on social media, and I was engaging with her. Some of the other guests I've had, like today we just dropped Aaron and Alvin Jones, who were my podcast a couple days ago. And these are personal relationships, and we talk about the relationships and how they've inspired and how they've changed their lives for the better despite where we're from. And I think that was such an amazing thing. So that's kind of how I do it. You reach out to people, you have personal relationships with them, and you try to add value with things that they try to do.
So you're on your second season now. How has podcasting expanded your personal and business brand awareness, and how has it offered your audience something different than other social media outlets have?
So when I first started doing my podcast, the typical thing I probably would have done is talk about business and business strategies and things that exist. But for me, I wanted to capture the authenticity of who I am and the friendships that have come out of business, because I think there's a stigma when you do business that you can work with people and not have a great relationship and a personal relationship with them, and I've been fortunate enough to do so. So by doing that and working with all these guys and being part of this whole entire procedure, I was able to work with them and really just kind of highlight the things that they've done and we've done, and how that personal relationship has developed into a business relationship and even expanded more in just personal lives and mentoring and working with each other. that's kind of how I did it. And it was an amazing feeling when we started doing that, second season.
Awesome. So while all this free content is a massive win for the end user, it is very time consuming for the creators. The equipment costs and the production time alone can cost a great deal. To offset the costs, many podcasts have taken on sponsors and do small ad reads to help cover the cost. Victor, you are no stranger to the mic. You have been an El Paso radio personality for years and have had very successful podcasts. What was your inspiration for podcasting, and how does it differ from radio?
Inspiration, I think radio and TV really go hand in hand. I mean, we can talk about the difference from podcasting to radio, but there is also a lot of things that are very much alike. And I cringe when I hear people talk about, radio is a dying medium, radio is a dying medium. It's not. It's constantly evolving. And part of that evolution, I think, is podcasting. It's sort of the next step that goes with it. The true difference, I would think, is where a lot of radio is still very structured, it's still very corporate run, if you will, for the good and the bad of it. Podcasting really isn't. It's more, as David said, it's more personable. You try to keep a personal connection with your audience. It's a little bit lax. For an example, if I have an interview on the radio, I've only got 3 to 5 minutes per segment per that interview. Whereas podcasting, now we're up to podcasts that go on for hours, with guests. And it's the difficult part of that is still trying to keep the audience engaged in that. But you have more of a time frame to make a connection as a host to your guest than to your audience as well. So a lot of it is different. A lot of it still goes, again, hand in hand. And I think it's the next evolution of TV, of radio, of that entertainment medium, I think.
Absolutely. Now, contests, games, sponsorships, and advertising are common things to manage as a radio personality. For someone who wants to start their podcast with no previous experience, what advice would you give them in setting up a podcast when it comes to keeping your listeners engaged while also generating sponsors?
I think the number one thing is just to pay attention. And I just got through finished saying how lax things can be, but you also still have to have a degree of professionalism, if you will. And I believe with the podcast more so, and I don't know why or what the science is behind it, but you still have the ability to really give your audience what they want. So if the audience wants an interview with somebody and they have something to give away a t-shirt, give away a chance to be a guest, give away something that, and David, we can all agree, in order to make money, you got to spend money, obviously. And even if you're giving away airtime, giving away valuable airtime, you still have to do that for your podcast to help make it successful. I believe, and I subscribe to the theory of you'll win people over with a lot of little stuff than a chance at one big thing. If I can give away a pen, 100 pens, that's going to make the listener, that's going to make your audience feel like, well, I have a chance at that, instead of one person's going to win a trip to Las Vegas. Well, what are my odds of that? But I know if I subscribe and I listen and I hit the subscribe button and like button and I email a question for a chance to win a t-shirt or a pen or a cup or whatever, at least I know I can engage my audience a little bit better that way. And really, what I'm saying also falls back into radio as well. I mean, it's really gone full circle in this new medium of podcasting.
So you've worked with many different personalities on your show as well. What advice would you give to those who want to add a co-host to their show, but not exactly sure what it will be like?
The most important thing, whether you have one co-host, whether you're solo, whether you have a group of 5 people and you're interviewing somebody, is let that guest talk. The worst interviewer that I think I've ever seen in my life was David Letterman in his early years. David Letterman was a horrible interviewer, but he became good because basically he would sit down and just say, well, tell us about your movie, and let the guest explain everything out. I think, you do your research, you do your prep work, you do all of that, but you can get too involved that sometimes you won't even let your guest talk. You're answering questions for them, and all the guest can do is sit there and go, right. So, or no, or yes. So you definitely want to get somebody as a co-host to follow along with that interject. It's almost like commentary, color commentary for a sportscast.
If I can interject with Vic, since we used to work together, I think it adds when you have somebody there that you can bounce something off, because, and he's absolutely right when you talk about having the guests. They want to hear the guests because they hear you all the time. Like, I hear you talk all the time, dog. Yeah, I'm going to hear your guests talk.
Yeah.
So the main thing is focus on them. And like Vic says, let them talk because we want to hear what they want to say. But to answer your question, when you're going to have a brand new guest, make sure, first of all, that if you're going to have a partner, that they're really into doing the podcast with you. And even if because they're going to be scared at first because it's brand new to them. But even at that, you tell them, hey, you know what? It's like riding a bike. You're going to fall off maybe a couple times, but then you're going to get used to it, and you're going to be smooth sailing after that. It's practice with everything. And the one thing with me and Vic, the one advantage that we have over some other people when it comes to podcasting is we had the opportunity to practice almost every day on the radio, but still that means, look at the success David is having right now. All it does is go out there and you show people what you're made of. You throw your heart out there, and if they like you, they'll embrace you. And if they won't, they're not going to embrace you. But either way, there's gonna be people. Me and you were talking about this earlier. There's going to be people out there that are going to hate the stuff that you do because there's haters out there. And that's one thing that I really have to point out, that if you do start a podcast, and by the way, I encourage everybody to start a podcast because this is the point where me and Vic look very old because we're old. But the bottom line is when it's true. It's true. And my man Joe Dorgan, what's up, baby? I see you. If you wanted to do your own show, if you wanted to express yourself, you literally had to be either in newspaper, in TV, or in radio. You literally had to have a job. Nowadays, with the technology, anybody can go out there and start your own podcast. It's just amazing. I love the fact that there's so many different types of podcasts out there. Where before, it was so restricted to what the people that had the real money, the corporations, the TV stations, the radio station. Oh, you're going to listen to this. But no, man, I want to listen to that, But now I think it's awesome that there's so many opportunities to do podcasts. But if you're going to start a podcast, straight up, you got to have thick skin because it comes with the territory. When you have the guts to put yourself out there, people will judge and they're going to say something to you. So just take it. It goes with it. It's like me and Vic talk about. It comes with the territory.
Yeah,
it
absolutely.
really does.
Katie, we're at a position now where, as Mando said, everybody has a podcast now. This is something that we haven't seen in the past 5 years. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, the talk of podcast was still relatively new. You were probably, Dave, on the forefront of doing podcasting 15 years ago, 10 years ago. Now you tune in and everybody has a podcast. Everybody's all over. So you need to find a way to make it a little bit different, a little bit unique. You need to tweak and modify it to make it interesting, to make it appealing, as Mando had said. So really, to circle back to what you would ask, any little thing that you can do to make it interesting and different and not the same old four people sitting on a microphone, surrounded by sycophants laughing at whatever, that's just going to be a bonus for anybody.
I think if I can add to it too, if we can, like, whatever you're going to do a podcast on, make sure it's something that you have a lot of passion for. You have a lot of knowledge of, because if you pick a subject, because like Vic said, there's so many podcasts out there, I would suggest you pick something that you're good at, that you know a lot of information about, and then you bring somebody that's with you that might know another different type of topic, because the one thing where I see where podcasts fail is that they're too open-minded and they go through different stuff. They don't stick on one thing. The successful ones kind of like pick and choose the one subject. So like people are the sports experts. They do sports. You got people that are music experts like Vic, or like Prince expert like Vince. He should just do a Prince podcast. That's what Vince he should do, honestly. But specific-minded stuff, because believe it or not, every subject has an audience. Every single subject, as obscure as it would sound, they have an audience,
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So the advantage, I would say, as you were saying, that the podcasting format, it offers endless variety and options to the viewers and listeners. Any topic a person may be interested in can be found online in a podcast format, giving listeners a wide variety of content to choose from, and it keeps them engaged for over a long period. In 2020, the top 5 categories for podcasts were society and culture, business, comedy, health, news, and politics. In less than an hour per day, listeners can become industry experts on their favorite topics. Rae, you are the sister to NFL athletes Aaron and Alvin Jones and co-host on the Vino and Rae Show. Y'all are a brother-sister rivalry that will keep you laughing and tuning in for more. Whose idea was it to start the podcast, and how did you come about recording your first episode?
Honestly, Alvin came to me. We were sitting, I was coming from the back door, and Alvin said, "Hey, you want to do a podcast tomorrow?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it," right? It was literally just, let's do it. And he said, "All right." And I said, "What are the topics?" He said, "Figure it out." And I was like, okay. So since the pandemic, we all lived together. Before Aaron went back to Green Bay, we were all in the same house together. And so just having that connection with them, and he's like, "Let's do it." And I'm like, "All right, let's go." And I'm like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Like, I listen to podcasts every day, and I always wanted to do a podcast. I'm like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And the next day, he's like, "You ready?" I'm like, "Let's go." And we came, we met Ace, and that was it. We got started.
Got your first episode.
That was our first episode.
Which, by the way, it's how we all pretty much got started. We all met Ace, and Ace got us all hooked up.
Ace is the key. The Jones family is known as philanthropists, educators, entrepreneurs, and athletes. What did starting this podcast mean for you and your personal brand, and how do you feel about being so open on air with your brother, and how do you keep it so entertaining?
Ooh, being open is hard. One, because everyone wants to know who you are, right? Especially being the sister of Alvin and Aaron. They want to know who you are, what are you about, and just trying to make sure that we are spreading, being real as possible, right? But also being extremely positive, extremely open. The way we stay open is if you guys know what's outside of the podcast, that's our relationship. We decide to keep it as raw as possible. Nothing's off limits. Except for when Alvin kicks me under the table, he's like, "No, we can't talk about that," right? But it's nothing off limits, and we just wanted to make sure that we kept our family image up, right? Like, we wanted to make sure that people, they know who we are, but they got a little in depth about who the Jones family is. We are a real family. Like, we are just like everyone else, and we bicker like everyone else, and we love each other like everyone else. So we just wanted to make sure that we could show that.
You guys do, for sure.
Thank you.
Podcasting is very intimate, I feel, and unlike traditional marketing channels, which tend to be very curated, podcasts are often casual and unfiltered. Even if your podcast follows a general script or outline, your voice adds a human element to your business and gives listeners an authentic feel for your personality of your brand. You guys talk about everything, and I mean everything, and it's hilarious. You talk about new music, hot topics, worldwide issues, and it all seems pretty candid to me. What is your strategy for the content of your episodes?
We don't talk about it all week. Right? So I have no idea what he's going to bring to the table. He has no idea what I'm going to bring to the table. Right? So we go in here blindly, and I have to think like, "Oh my gosh, what is Alvin going to say?" Right? And so by not talking about it, it gets really raw, right? Because it's like we can't rehearse our responses. So it becomes just this open thing. Like, he catches me off guard every week. And so it's just, we don't talk. Like, we talk about everything else except for our topics. So.
And again, I think that falls back onto what I was talking about earlier, is that you can always prep and get the week ready. But when you kind of sort of go into it blindly, as it's perfect for them to do so, that's what keeps it a little bit fresh, entertained, and different than, say, a reality TV show. Can I put that in quotes? Because even at that, how much of that is really scripted? Yeah. Here, you're getting the absolute rawness, and it's also, no idea we were going to talk about that.
And it's also genuine, too, when you have no idea what was going to come out of his mouth. That it's your real reaction. That's honestly what the audience loves.
Yeah. And have you ever stopped a podcast and said, no, let's restart, let's do that over? Or you just go right through?
We just go right through. There you go. And there's times where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Ace, cut that." And I was like, "No, we're not cutting that," right? So you get the raw of us.
And that's again, it goes back to that personal connection. Even if the audience gets a 10% of what you're bringing, it's even the way radio was explained to me way back in the day. I think it's true with podcasting now. You watch Seinfeld on TV, and you know it's characters on TV, but it's a show about a guy who really was a comedian really named Seinfeld, who really had a crazy neighbor, who really had friends surrounding him. So you're still getting a slice of reality, even though it's blown up 50, 60, 70, 80, 100% for the podcast.
Right. Agreed.
Now, Mando, your name is Mando Monster Medina.
Yes.
What a personality.
Yes.
Tell us how you got your name.
Well,
Not that story.
I'll tell you the clean story.
Tell them that story.
I'm kind of like the Joker. Like, you want to know why I got these scars? I got a story for it for everybody. Honestly, back then, and Vic can attest to this. When you started in radio, everybody would use a fake name. You know, even the legends. You know, even they use fake names. So with me, the way the name came up is that the guy that gave me the name. His name is Robert Garcia. He did sports here for El Paso a long time. He lives in Austin now. He's like maybe 5'5". I'm like 6'2". And back then I was like maybe 250, 260. So one day he looked at me and goes, "Man, you're a monster." And I was like, "That's it. I'm going to keep the name and I'm going to make it stick," because for what me and Victor in the radio back then, it would be a lot easier for if people just say, "Hey, Mando Medina," you know, they'll kind of forget that. But if you add like a nickname, Monster, they will remember that. Now, of course, I don't look like a monster at all. You know, one of the craziest things when little kids, when parents would introduce me to the kids, "Oh, this is Mando the Monster Medina," and you used to see their face like, you said it to me. But no, the whole reason why is so that way people remember the name. You know, that's honestly how the name came to be.
So you would say that the Monster's been a part of your personal brand, and you've kind of carried it through your career with you.
Yeah, it's been for me since I first started. What, Vic? Like maybe like I think I created the Monster like maybe like
90,
a year into it, maybe
93, 94?
something like that. No, 97.
97. And I had Victor Cruz long before the other guy did in New York.
Yeah,
Before he was salsa dancing in the end zone. I was Victor Cruz before.
Now, you have a ton of experience behind the mic and in front of the mic as a radio personality talent as well. So what would you say some essential gear that you would recommend in order to have a quality podcast production would you recommend to a new podcaster?
The main thing I'm going to recommend to everybody that's thinking about starting a podcast, even if you have a podcast right now, is going to be this: what it sounds like. Your main thing is going to be what it sounds like. You might have the most interesting topic of all time. You might have the number one expert, but if it sounds horrible, people are going to go click, or they're just going to move on to the next podcast. It doesn't sound horrible. Same time, because now, like when you, like me and Vic talked about it and David talked about, it's also you kind of combine video, because nowadays, like, it's not only it's podcasting. Podcasting now is becoming video podcasting. You know, because a lot of people are able to do that now because it's affordable now. Back in the day, it was very expensive. You had to get yourself like a $2,000 camera. Now you can get yourself a GoPro, $200, $300, and you can live stream it. But the main thing is, you might be the hottest person in the world, but if it sounds horrible, they're gonna move somewhere else. So I would invest in some microphones. Honestly, like, believe it or not, YouTube is a beautiful thing, because you just type in YouTube, put best microphones for podcasting, and you're going to have guys that what they do, and they just review microphones, you know? And so go out there and do some research, or just the internet. Google like microphones for podcasting, affordable podcasting, because there are microphones that are, you go from the extreme where they're very pricey, and then some that are very affordable, you know? But even if you can't afford the decent microphones, just start. My main thing is just start. Go out there, get your experience, start getting that nervousness out of you. Just go out there and start doing it. Like I said, you need repetitions. You need to go out there, get practice, keep going and going and going. And then when you can afford buying some decent microphones, you move up to it. So honestly, it's the microphones and decent cables. Just do some research. Like these microphones right here, I'll tell you straight up, they're only $100. But look at them. You'd think that these are like maybe $1,000 microphones. You know, back in the day, like, and I'm not throw the back in the day, of course, because we're the old guys. So I'll say I'm the old guy. You know, microphone like this, like in Radio Land, was about $1,000. Now it's $100. You know, so that's the beauty of the technology, that the cost to produce a high quality program now, podcast, it's becoming very, very affordable.
It is, for sure. Now, once they get their mic, what technologies do you see that would benefit or grow someone's podcast? For example, StreamYard. What technologies do you recommend?
I'll be honest with you, like there's so much out there, and the beauty, like StreamYard is a streaming service that actually we're using right now to stream live. That works with Macintosh or Windows, because there's a battle. I don't know if you know about this. There's the Mac world. There's the Windows world. I'm a Mac guy. Ace is a Mac guy. I don't know what you guys are, but to each their own.
Whatever Ace is.
Whatever Ace is, But Macintosh also, they have one called Ecamm Live, which is basically kind of like StreamYard. Basically what it is, it's a streaming service. And like I said, with the technology nowadays, these programs, and I always get excited. Ace gets excited because we look at each other because we know what it is. Like, it's like a full-blown production suite now, where like before, like I said, you needed a mixer that was like this big, and then you need like 50,000 cameras. But now you can run off one camera. You can have graphics and things of that nature off one program. So there's a couple out there, StreamYard, Ecamm Live. There's some that are like more expensive than others. Like I said, just Google streaming services, because some will make you pay. Zoom, I mean, if anything that we have learned in this year, Zoom has basically taught us how to look into a camera on the webcam and tell us how to do stuff. There's so many programs that have come of that. Also, I do recommend a mixer, and a mixer is what you plug these cables into your microphone, into your mixer. That way you have more than one mic, and you can monitor the person's volume, things of that nature. Headphones as well, like if you're going to do it. Here we don't need the headphones, because we can hear each other, but sometimes you might want the headphones, things of that nature.
I think far and foremost, though, it's just get started.
Yep.
Just
Right.
find a way to get things started, and you're going to learn. If you have a business, you're learning as you go. And the same thing's going to happen while you're podcasting. You just can't jump 100% into it and say, bought all the equipment, I'm a podcaster now. You're still going to learn
Yep.
each and every time. And as Mando has alluded to, the technology changes so fast, so quick, that things we're doing now in the podcast world we couldn't do 5 years ago. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 years that we're going to be able to do? Holograms, I guess, holographic people interviewing side by side or whatever. I don't know.
That'll be
But I
fun.
mean, but we're really getting to that. We're almost getting to that point.
And just think about what you can do with your phone now. You can literally podcast on your phone. You can buy a mic that connects into your iPhone or Google Plus or whatever. I'm an Apple guy, so I don't know the other phones. Samsung, but still, the fact is that, like Vic said, you can start anywhere now. And believe it or not, like the microphones on these cameras, on these phones are amazing. The cameras are like beyond amazing. One of the shows we do here at the Downtown Spaces, the Herald Post End Zone, which is basically a high school show, and it's innovative because it's never been done before. It's the first time, because back when I used to run the 600 East in El Paso here in town, we would cover high school football games. And the way we did it is we would send reporters out there to the game. So, for example, if David was at the game, like between East Led and Jefferson, hey, David, what's going on in the game? And David would tell us, well, the first quarter, blah, 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 this is what's going on. But it would just be through the radio. Now, what we're doing is we're using the phones with the cameras, with the StreamYard, and I can go, hey, Vic, what's going on in the game, Burgess against Eastwood? And Vic can actually have his camera on him, selfie mode, looking at the field behind him, or he can put it the other mode where he's literally showing us the field and we're actually watching the game. So it's amazing the stuff you can do now. Technology is amazing.
And not to shamelessly plug anything, but obviously Downtown Spaces can provide the podcast
Yes, of course.
and the
Yes. Of
studio and guys like Ace to help it. We already have all that put together. We all do our shows here. So no shameless plug there.
No, absolutely not whatsoever. But again, we couldn't have done this. You couldn't have done this 5 years ago.
Right.
There was
absolutely.
no way, because technology is moving so fast. And again, shameless plug back into radio, because I'm such the radio guy.
Yeah.
These are the sort of things that are going to go hand in hand with whatever other medium you're looking at. Advertising, absolutely advertise in a radio station, advertise on television stations, but also look at your digital marketing as well. Look at your podcast. Don't pick and choose, or if you have a business and you're thinking, where am I going to try to get monies from? Well, by all means, look at all the outlets, because as proficient and as advanced as podcasting is right now, let's be honest, not a lot of people are into it still. There's still a lot of old school people. As great as Pandora and YouTube and Spotify is right now, you still have a group of people who are going to be tied to their radio, the local side of it. So if I can just take a moment and push on the local side of stuff, spend your monies on that local environment, whether it's local podcasting, if you will, local television. Spend your monies as best as you can and invest your monies in all brands as well. Because podcasting is hot right now. Who knows where it's going to be in 5 years, if it even is going to stick again, or if there's going to be a new type of brain implants, I guess, that we go directly into a person's feed themselves. I don't know.
You're getting into Elon Musk territory now, brother.
I know.
That's what you're going now.
I've been home a lot these days.
Yeah.
I haven't been doing too much.
We have all been home a lot.
A lot of reading. But I mean, in other words, it all goes hand in hand with everything we do. I don't think there's one greater thing better than the other thing. I think you need to know all of it, accept all of it, and utilize all of it as well.
Now, some podcasters are just starting off with the audio, while others are making sure to have the audio and the video. How important do you think it is to start it off with doing both, or starting it off with just one and easing into video?
I go, if you want to go ahead, David.
I know, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I think if you're just starting out, just start with the audio part of it, because it's just you and your guest and the microphones. You don't have to worry about the camera setup, the lighting, things of that nature. You know, unless you just put the one camera, you put your phone and get used to it. But as a beginner, I think audio would be the easiest part, because I think you guys would agree it's a lot easier to do, because plus you don't have to get all pretty like as we are right now. You know, you can just be yourselves.
And I think the other side of it too is make sure that you have something to show. You have a visual medium, utilize it to the best of your ability. Now, if you're not going to be showing anything, then maybe you just want to stick with an audio podcast. I don't know if, call me old school, but I don't know if I just want to see three knuckleheads sitting down in front of microphones talking when there's nothing visual about it. Old photographs, you're selling something, you're whatever the case is. So long as you have something visual to share, then share it. Otherwise, I'd even just go as far as to say cost effective and just stick with the audio.
And I will say, just as a beginner, doing the audio first, it was I was less nervous, right? Because as soon as Ace was like, we're going on camera, I'm like, we're going to do what? You know? But being thrown into that, because Alvin, we had to do a virtual, right? Because he was away, having that audience so they can see us as well, to see our facial expressions, to see that, that kind of engages them as well. So I would definitely start with audio first.
Good advice. Now, each of you have, I'm sure, encountered your own critics, your own haters. What's your advice to those podcasters that are kind of facing those issues?
I mean, I could probably speak. I mean, you know, for me, I think the biggest issue is you're going to get haters no matter what.
Yes.
It doesn't matter what you do.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if you're saving the world. It doesn't matter. People are just going to dislike you because your energy, your passion, the way you think about things. And a lot of those people are just, unfortunately, not very happy with the scenario. The only thing that I can probably get any advice to is it's going to happen. It's inevitable, but you can't allow them to restrict you. And I always say this in my podcast, right? Before you start, you know, people are saying you didn't do anything. Once you start doing it, they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe you're going to make it. When you actually make it, they say you changed. And then when you're retired, they say you're a has-been. So you never win, right? So what does it matter? So at that point, you should go out and do that. And, you know, when I was doing my podcast, I was very conscientious about my brand and things that I was saying out there. But at the end of the day, you know, the validation comes from the listeners and the messages that they send you. It's not necessarily just based on being represented from New York Weekly or anything else. It's just that the people that you've impacted. And to me, that will overshadow any hater any day of the week.
I agree 100%, because I hear more of, gosh, I got a good laugh, right? You hear 10 of those to the haters, right? And you have to keep going. You have to remember your why. Why did you get started? Why do you guys want to do this? Why are you continuing? Because they're never going to be happy. Like David said, no matter what you do, someone's never going to be happy. So you have to just remember why you're doing this.
I will throw out though, to go against the grain just a little bit. You do need to listen to what people are saying.
Yes.
Agreed.
And if you're hearing perfect example. We use that example in radio. For every 10 likes you get, you're going to get 1 dislike. And the 10 likes are only those voicing something. So you know more people are probably feeling that way anyway on a like side. Oh, she made me laugh. 10 people said it, but 100 people probably feel it. However, you still need to go back and look at your critique. And if you're getting, a handful of, and anybody can do it. My God, over the weekend, I love reading hotel reviews just because everybody thinks they're world travelers and they start bashing on. I love reading reviews, but you can sort of read between the lines and know when a hotel isn't good. And again, you can sort of read between the lines and know, ooh, maybe we really shouldn't be, or maybe I shouldn't have, or maybe we should. So to dismiss it and just say, all negative reviews are haters, I don't think so. Oh, absolutely, there's trolls. Absolutely, there's people out there. But you also need to really read between the line about something and go, that did touch a nerve. It's not just somebody saying I suck or whatever. I hit a nerve there as well. On the negative side, maybe I need to look at that as well.
Yeah, that's very true. That is very true, because you look at it where Alvin's virtual and they'll say, well, we can barely hear Alvin, right? We think of it as negative, like they're hating, but no, he's 100% right. They're just giving you that feedback, and we can say, oh, how can we adjust this next week? So you can take that feedback and adjust it. But like David said, everyone's not going to be happy, right? You look at, they can say one thing this week and next week will be something else, right? But you take it in stride, and you take it to adjust that fits your development, your business.
Now, what strategies would you give to a new podcast who's trying to grow their listeners and subscribers? What advice would you give?
I'll say, being the rookie here, the best advice is get your friends involved. People who already believe in you and that already know what you believe in, get them involved. I think the thing that helped us the most was our friends, our family sharing our podcast, right? Because they already believe in us. And then from their listeners, their followers, they bring more people in, right? And just stay consistent.
Word of mouth, social media, use social media to its fullest. It's free, you don't have to spend money to advertise on that. That's the way I would do it when you're first starting. Even now, you still do. You still got to be up on all the aspects of social media if you can't afford to advertise, which most podcasters really can't,
Yeah, absolutely. What's the old saying? You can't catch any fish if you don't cast a rod.
Yep.
I mean, you've got to throw it out there at least every once in a while. I'm personally not a big fan of shoving somebody's face in it constantly, because to me that does the opposite. Again, old school. But I think the more you can get your brand out there, your name out there, absolutely the best, involving family, involving friends, almost. And again, it goes full circle, almost guerrilla branding, just going out there and throwing out flyers and selling CDs out of the back of your car,
which
like we used to do back in
We've done.
Yeah, which, by the way, after this is over, I've got some CDs in the back of my car that I want to sell.
We'll buy some from you.
Yeah, right. But I mean, I think that type of guerrilla marketing, stickers, anything that you can do just to get that brand out there, because you got to figure, and again, any one of us can say this, how many podcasts, David, had it taken before you really took off?
Right.
You can do 15, you can do 30, and right when you think it's time to wrap it up and say, well, that's it, I've done it, that's when it soars, and you're going, oh my God, what am I, So you never know when it's going to hit. You just got to always be selling ABC, right? Always be selling ABS.
Always be closing.
Always be closing.
Always
That's it.
be
I knew
closing.
was going to come to me in a second. Yeah, absolutely.
I think one strategy, and I want to credit you from the top marketing on this one, is when I actually do my podcast for season 2, right? Season 1 was like, I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't sure. My friend was telling me to do it. I was like, there's no way anyone wants to listen to me. Who wants to hear my story? And there's always that uncertainty despite your accomplishments. And that's one thing I want to tell everyone else is everyone feels uncertain because they're just not sure about it. When season 2 came around, I wanted to make it different because I wanted to invite and incorporate friends. So that's when I started doing the video side of it as well. And so one strategy I did, because I don't have a ton of time, is I'll grab my video content and then I'll cut it and I put it on my Instagram. So then it actually previews my 1-minute message while still talking about my show, while I still have a podcast. So efficiency is key for me. So, that was some method I learned from that company, and that's really helped me a lot as well. And I think that's kind of been a success. And to Victor's point, like, I don't know if you guys know this, but like 4 or 5 weeks before I got this thing, I was almost at the end of my podcast. I was like, well, I'm not really getting as much likes and comments and praise, and I'm getting more of that when I put something silly up there. And had it not been for the audience, had it not been for that one comment, had it not been for people that said that I've actually helped them in some sort of event, I would have stopped. And then to Victor's point, 5 weeks later, I get this email that I'm on New York Weekly, and I'm like, what are you talking about, right? So everybody feels that way. It's not just, you, the audience. I felt that way, right? And so I want to tell that as an encouraging strategy is just you just got to keep going. You never know who you're going to listen to. You never know who's going to plug in. You never know whose life you're changing and inspiring. But as long as you help one person, that's all that matters.
And I think to conclude in all of our feelings and thoughts with it, you almost have to keep, I don't want to say modifying, but you have to keep growing the podcast. And the best example I can use is think of your favorite television show. I'm going to use the example of Impractical Jokers. I love those guys. But if you ever watch their first 2 or 3 shows, the first episodes, and look at where they are now, 9, 10 seasons, it's the same show. It's presented differently. I think that's what's going to happen with your podcast as well. As you keep presenting it, you're going to have to, whether you know it or not, subconsciously or not, it's going to change a little bit. It's not going to be the same show you did season 1. And here you are 2 seasons into your show, and look at how different your show really is now. So I think you need to have that strategy of what we're doing right now is good, it's fantastic, but you know what? Who knows what's going to happen next season, next year, next 10 episodes down the line. You've got to, and again, just like with business, I don't think any business model now is the same as it was when it first started. So it's just got to constantly, you got to be prepared for that growth, that evolution, if you will.
Absolutely. Well, let's open it up to a few questions from our Instagram and our live. We do have one question that asks, how do you give authenticity to your story without giving up too much of your privacy?
I think we'll let you handle that first.
Go ahead, Rae. Knock yourself out.
It's very hard. Honestly, I think you kind of lose that privacy. It depends on what you're talking about because you're being extremely vulnerable. And with being vulnerable, you lose some privacy. But you have to be honest with yourself before you be honest with the people, right? So you can't just come out here and say, I'm not going to say this, I'm not going to say that, right? Because then you're limiting yourself about what you're giving to your audience. So you really just have to be able to be vulnerable and understand that once you're podcasting about certain things, your opinion, your information is no longer private.
It's a lot like social media, isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly.
How much are you putting on Facebook?
Everybody knows their business.
Yeah. I think once you put yourself out there, it's kind of like no going back, that. And when the audience sees that you're being very genuine, which I think is, for me, the most important thing when you're doing a podcast, be genuine, be yourself. Don't try to be a character or whatever, unless your character works, and it's amazing because there's a lot of there out there. But just if you're trying to reach somebody, trying to get that message, just be genuine. Just tell people how you really feel. And as David can attest to this, you're going to reach people, because they feel how genuine you are and the message you're trying to come across.
And again, to go against the grain just a little bit, how much do you not want to reveal? How much of yourself are you really willing to share? Are there certain things that you just absolutely will not talk about, and that's nobody's business?
And that's true, because
true.
For me, like in all the stuff I ever did, I would never talk about my relationships at all, because you think of your partner, because it's bad enough they got to deal with somebody that's in the public eye. So
podcast eye,
or whatever, because think about this now, because when you start doing podcasts, hey, I listen to your podcast, you kind of do become in the public eye when somebody recognizes your voice, so there are limits that you got to put to yourself there, and you got to realize what line you want to cross or not.
I think it's very, I hate using the word, but I think it's very self-censoring what you can and can't do. It's really up to you. Again, I go with the advice of what can you post on social media? Then share that. What are you willing to post on social media? Then share that as well.
I think for me and probably everyone else here is it's your brand. It's who you are as a person. And I think that as long as you're authentic to who you are, whether it's social media or podcast, then there is no need to make up stories or have lies or to figure out what you're trying to do, because you're trying to be who you are. So the other cautionary thing I would tell everyone is whatever brand you're trying to throw out there, make sure that you're comfortable with that brand, because that's it. That's who you're going to be in that eye. So why not just be you? That's just the best brand is yourself. And that, I think, will make an impactful difference and a meaningful difference as well.
Another question from our live is, what is the best way to target sponsors for your show and how to get key metrics and strategies?
You do a lot of this. Stuff right
May I
here
have
in my
another,
pocket.
sir, please?
Yeah,
Can I
please.
have another? Please, sir, another,
Again,
sir.
I honestly, maybe I'm wrong. Again, old school, but it just goes back to you've got to show numbers. You've got to show proof of where you are. Listen, there's a reason why we're the top rated. Again, using radio because that's my background. We're the top rated morning show. So because we're the top rated morning show, that's where you want to spend money on. Hey, we're the top rated, we're the top branded podcast crew. So this is where it's going to come from. I don't think you can be, in this day and age, shy about asking for a sponsorship. I can get you X amount of sponsors. A little bit like, and again, I hate using the term, but a little bit like social media influencers. You want me to be a part of this because I kind of sort of know what I'm doing. I'm kind of sort of know the people I'm bringing in. And again, that's just the old school numbers. Numbers win.
But that never changes. It all works, because people are going to say, "Oh, you got a show? Okay, well, let me see how many people listen to it, or how many
likes,
how many people are watching it." Things. But yeah, you're going to have to. So the one thing, if you're going to when you start your podcast, it's going to take some time. Unless you have like 1 million friends and they're going to subscribe right away, it's going to take time to build it up. Just prepared for that. But then I think like maybe 3 to 6 months, then you can start saying, hey, you know what, go to a local business, hey, I want to like work with you guys, will you sponsor me? But be reasonable. You can't be charging, you can't expect them to be paying you a lot of money when you're barely starting out as well. It goes hand in hand when you're trying to ask people to give you money to promote their business. Because remember, you are competing, as Vic said, with the other people, the TV stations, the radio stations, things of that nature, just because you're doing a podcast doesn't mean some other person is not doing a podcast. So you're going to have to show proof why they should choose your podcast over another podcast. That's just reality.
Yeah, it's funny, Mando, you say it that way, but it's absolutely true. Working in radio as long as I've worked, as long as Mando has worked, and you tell somebody I work at this radio station, and their first response typically is always, oh, well, you must be in competition with this other radio station. My response had always been, no, I work with them. We're in the same company. My competition is TV. My competition is magazines. My competition is the internet. Anywhere else somebody can go for their entertainment, for their information, was always my competition. I never looked at, even now, we work, at different radio stations. He was never my competition. My competition was elsewhere. So that's also what you need to consider in the podcast. In the podcast world, don't eat your young. We're all doing the same thing. Go somewhere else and get it. Go attack someplace else that will take away from you immediately. We can work on a network all together as a podcaster or radio or TV, but we need to go after that extra. You need to go after that extra money elsewhere where nobody else is. I think that's also the key.
Yep.
So, Katie, I have a question for these guys. So, how do you choose who do you go for sponsorships? What is your number one method for that?
I'm the wrong guy to ask. I have no sponsors.
Okay.
So although I am number one for weekly, I really don't. I just plugged it in and just started doing it because my purpose was to let people know that what my background was and where I came from, I go from there. I'll probably have to talk to these guys, but I have done obviously sponsorships, and I think it's at the bare minimum, it's people that you can assess that you can be proud of that is representative of your brand.
Okay.
Right? So that's important because, if it's not representative of your brand, people are like, what is the purpose of doing this, right? But I haven't done it yet for at least the podcast side, which I probably have to pretty soon.
No, you should.
So we'll go from there.
Ray asked the question, and we all looked over at Dave like,
And I was like, I'm definitely the wrong person to ask on
we
this
have
one.
no idea. I mean, he hit the nail on the head. Obviously, it's you almost can't get choosy. You almost can't get choosy.
Okay.
But it's true. You want somebody that it makes sense. And this is so ridiculous. And it goes back to the old TV days. Look, when you're watching the Wheel of Fortune, what commercials are they showing? They're not showing commercials for cereal. They're not showing commercials for they're showing commercials for
their audience,
vitamins.
yeah.
They're showing commercials for Depends. They're showing those type of commercials. And there's nothing wrong with that audience, but
Right.
that is the audience. So even as you as a host or even a producer somewhere, you would need to look at really who do you want sponsoring you? What image is going to fit into your podcast?
Okay.
And again, at that, money is money. We take money from anybody and
Right.
anyone that's going to be willing to give it to us. But again, it's somebody that you want to be connected with, right? You made that a connection about being with your show, being with your podcast.
And then, for example, the easiest, you guys talk sports, you know, you and your brothers, you know, like if somebody has a sports bar because you're talking sports, you know, that's something that kind of interacts with what your podcast is about too. You can look at it that way as well.
Okay.
yeah, of course, and there's the thin line of sellout. Oh, well, now she's only getting money because they paid her. And my
But see, now you're going down the kind of like where people are going to judge no matter what.
Yeah.
That we talked about that you kind of have to like brush that off. you
well,
know,
and my
'cause then
response is,
you
hey,
got to get your bills paid.
yeah, they're paying me, so I will sell out any day of the
Exactly.
week.
Okay.
I'll title sponsor my cap if I have to.
Yeah.
Just because.
Okay. Thank you.
Another question is, what signs do you look for in your audience's response, and how you know what to double down on with content?
I think a perfect example would be tying into your guests, finding out what kind of response your guest got. As we sit here, and Mando mentioned earlier, legendary El Paso and Joe Dorgan is sitting in the audience here with us. So I want to ask Joe, well, we had you on a couple of weeks ago. What did you hear? It's not just your friends and family that are now responding and saying, hey, mijo, you did a good job. Okay, that's all fine, well, and said and done. But what responses did people get from Joe about being on my podcast, if I can use it possessively? He was on, what type of relationship are other people 3 or 4 steps over saying as well? And I'm sure you get that type of
Yes.
same thing.
We do, especially with Aaron being in the public eye. You know, trying when he was on our show, you know, his fans were listening. So just getting their feedback and hearing what they had to say about his interaction with us and his relationship with us, you know, that definitely is a great way.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. What you guys are saying is that you gotta have, honestly, you gotta have a couple of people that keep it real for you, that they let you know, like, hey, this is what you did wrong, this is what you did good. But when you talk about your audience, you look at the things that people did like a lot, and then things that, like Vic talked about earlier, like some of the things that they might not have liked, and then you got to look back. And the one thing I will always say is, go back and listen to your podcast. Listen to it. Like after you record it, go back. It's called an air check. It's what they call back in the radio days, kids. It's called an air check. I still do it all the time, even when we do the TV stuff. You know, like go back and look at it, because there might be something that you thought you were all cool when you were doing the podcast, but then when you look at it, like, oh, I kind of misspoke, which I do a lot. I stumble. You know, it happens. You know, you're human. You know, it's natural. So always air check yourself.
Absolutely. Well. And if you're doing video podcasts, go back and rewatch. And you already heard your guest. You already heard them tell those great stories or talk about their fantastic business. Go back and watch yourself. The biggest critic you're going to have is yourself. You can't just push something out there and then walk away from it like a action hero from the flames, you know, rolling up behind them. As great as we all want to think that is and looks, you've got to go back and look at it. I know here most recently I went back and looked at our first video podcast, and I was doing things with my hands down here. I'm grabbing my socks, I'm pulling the cord, and I said, man, I can't, looking at my watch constantly because I'm watching the time or whatever. You are your biggest critic. You need to go back and see what you did yourself also. Absolutely. Air check yourself, yeah.
Another question we have is, how often do you do your podcast, and what is your time limit before listeners tune out?
Well, what I've noticed, we do it once a week, only because of time, right, and availability. We do it once a week, and we try to keep it under an hour, because we are heavy podcasters ourselves, and we're like, at what point do we drown out? At what point do we do something else? Or like, okay, we'll come back to that next week, right? So we try to keep it under an hour just to keep you engaged enough, and then like, okay, see you next week. We'll see you again for another hour next week. So
I think an hour is fine, but also if you have that guest that just is energetic and they capture the audience, you can go with them as long as you want. You know, if that guest or the stuff that you're talking about is just there. If it's money, to use another term, if it's money, but at the same time, don't go like 6 hours. I mean, you're going to go 6 hours, nobody's going to watch it, but I mean, you went 6 hours, it's awesome that you did it, but know your limits, like once you start forcing it, it's kind of time to stop, kind of like when you lose the groove, you lose the momentum, it's time to stop. That's how I've always looked at it, because you can have a guest that, the thing with podcasting is that there's no commercial breaks. The radio world, me and Vic were used to, is like we could keep somebody like an hour, 2 hours easy because, hey, we got to take a 5-minute, 6-minute commercial break. With podcasting, you just go straight. And that's one of the things that I had to get used to, is just going straight with my guest for that long of a period. But I say, but sometimes, though, too, less is more. You can go like 23 minutes, 30 minutes, but I think, honestly, it depends on your content and your guests.
David?
I mean, I agree. I think the biggest thing is you have this flow with this person and the energy that's there, and you'll just feel it, right? And at a certain point, you might be 30 minutes in, you might be an hour in. I don't ever go over an hour, but I definitely try to feel the energy of the person, but I do put it out for an hour, and if it's less, that's great. If it's more, it is what it is. But being authentic to them. The other trick I probably do is, because of my time, is sometimes I'll schedule 5 podcast recordings within a week and then break them off within that month and a half, because I'm traveling and running around so much, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, because that means you still care about your audience, but at the same time, you still have to run your life. So a lot of times I hear, well, I don't have time to run a podcast. How do you do it? Well, I just do 5 in a week sometimes, and then I'll just break it out for 5 weeks straight, right? And that doesn't mean you're unauthentic. It just means that I care enough about my audience and still care enough about my career and my passions, so I'm going to continue and maintain doing that and going from that point on. So, that's another thing I would probably suggest too as well.
If anybody knows anything about me, the top 3 things that I'm passionate about: Prince, music, Las Vegas, and Star Wars. And all those we can get into a different topic at any other time.
Don't mention the new ones, because he's going to get upset.
Yeah, I know, but the last 3. Anyway, and of course, aside from my family. Okay, the family, that's number 1. But one of the key elements that I've learned from Vegas, it's something that everybody here has touched on also, is always leave them wanting more. You can go too long, too far at times. Maybe an hour is too much of a good thing. People start tuning out. Our podcast, our video podcast, or where we are right now, Stayed Tuned El Paso with Priss and Vic, where we are right now is about a 20 to 30 minute video podcast. And I think 20 to 30 minutes is an attention span anyway. When you look at the radio world, we break things down into quarter hours, every 15 minutes. If you ask anybody in radio, how long is your show? How many hours of a show did you do? And they respond with, well, I did 3 hours of a radio show. No, you didn't. Yeah. You did 15 minutes, 15 minutes, 15 minutes, because every 15 minutes you get a brand new audience. You have to think that way in podcasting terms also, I think. So if you're doing an hour's worth of a show, you've got to think every 15 minutes, I've already lost somebody's attention. So our show goes about 20 minutes or so, and sometimes that's not enough, but that's okay, because they want more, and they're going to tune in tomorrow for maybe, or next week. I love the idea, by the way, of recording 5 shows in a day, because
it's a secret.
No, I mean, but that's how we're doing it also. We got to knock out as many shows as we can. So even at that, as the host, you've got to keep yourself entertained. By show number 3 or 4, you're spent.
Yep.
I don't care how many different topics you've just had. You're spent. And it's going to show when you watch that episode 6 weeks from now, or whenever it is that you release them out. Same thing for your guests. And again, he's my anchor right now because he's here. Joe Dorgan could have gone on with us for 2 hours with all the great Club 101 stories. We got to cut him short to 30 minutes. And you know what? Maybe in a month from now, we'll have him come back for part 2. You leave them wanting more. End on a high note if you can, and make them want more. I'm a big believer in that. Big believer.
And Katie, the other thing I would say is know your body, right? Like there's a point where I lose interest. Right? I'm thinking about, what's I got to do today? What else does he have to do? You know, is he still entertained?
What's for dinner?
And what's for dinner? You know, what's my daughter doing? So you have to know your body. And like, when do you lose interest in what you're talking about? Right. So that's a key thing too.
When you get bored, everybody watching or listening, they're getting bored too. So that's when you know you should end it. If you're bored,
they've already been.
Yes.
Right. The second you're bored, they've been bored before you.
Yep.
It's the rule of thumb.
Well, we have time for one more question, and that question is, pull it up. how did you introduce your podcast? Introducing your podcast is a big thing. So how did you all do it?
It went 3, 2, 1.
Right.
Hi, everybody. I think a lot of it, and again, really, what we're talking about podcasting can go into any type of medium. It can be a radio program. It can be a TV show. It can be a movie. You sell, you pre-sell, you prep. You get the word out on the street and say, hey, look, this is going to be happening. Hey, listen, I think I've got some pretty cool guests coming up. Maybe you guys are going to be interested. Give it a listen. You're always, always be, what? Closing. Always be closing. Always be selling. You're just always pushing your product. And again, even if, let's talk about a business who has a product and the best pens in the world. Next week, we're going to talk about these pens. You guys are going to get blown away by these pens. These pens are absolutely the best. And you keep pushing the product until it actually comes out. And then it's the marketing, it's the packaging, it's everything that we've talked about here this whole hour seminar, the production value of it all. As fancy as you want to get, as basic as you want to get, you're still packaging this great product, whether it's a pen or a podcast, so that everybody can enjoy what it is that you want to bring to the table and say, look, there it is. Here's my product. Enjoy it. I've told you about it for a month. Here it is now. Enjoy. And again, just old school marketing techniques that still carry over very well
and
into the modern world.
And I think that's never going to change. Those techniques are going to be there forever. It's just different platforms now. It's social media. You got your Instagram, you got your Twitter, you got your Snapchat, you got your Facebook, all that other LinkedIn. There's so many ways you can promote yourself for free. But the main thing, like I've said before, is start. You're not going to hit it out of the park the first time, but start.
And we're in such a weird place right now. And I'm not talking about COVID. I'm not talking about 2020. I'm just talking about even technology-wise now, where anybody and everybody has a podcast. You're not going to do anything, quote unquote, wrong when you first start. It's, again, we said it. It's going to be evolving each and every time anyway. You're going to be learning everything as you go anyway. Sure, you want to knock it out of the park on the first day, and you probably will. Chances are you're
No, you're not. I'm being honest. You're not. You're not. Like when I teach people the first time they're going to broadcast, I'm going to tell them, hey, dog, you're going to suck today, but it's okay because next time you're going to be better, and then the next time you're going to be better than that, and then next thing you know, you're a pro. So don't be afraid. You're going to suck the first time.
That's why he's better at it than I am, because I tried to hit it out of the park the first time, and he already knew he was going to knock some grounders in. How about that for a sports reference?
There you go.
Didn't know I like sports.
No, I did not.
Absolutely. I think it's always going to be, and again, here you are, David, 2 seasons, 2 years, whatever the case is, and I bet you are still learning every time you get behind the mic.
I mean, sitting here, I've already learned a bunch of new things, so I appreciate that, and that just goes and shows, the plethora of things that you can learn, and you're always learning. So it's absolutely true. You always need to be learning and going from there, making adjustments.
Absolutely.
And Katie, to your question, I would say that when we started, we did not advertise. We literally just did it. So if you do not advertise and tell everyone about it, just do it. Like, if you want to do it, just do it. And if people want to follow you and you don't promote all week, they're going to follow you. You're going to have consistent followers whether you promote it or not. So just go out there and do it, because we had no idea, like, what are we going to talk about? What are we going to promote? Like, if you don't know, you can't promote, right? So we didn't even have a name for our show when we first started. We literally just did it. So don't let that be a hindering factor because you haven't promoted before you got started. Just do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, thank you all. And that concludes
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, yes.
When is this going to air?
Oh, this is going to air.
We're live.
We're live
live
right
right
now.
now.
We're live now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, we're doing it live?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
You're already out
technology.
there.
But we will be posting it on our YouTube channel, so you can go back there so you can check out all the advice that each and every one of you have given us tonight. We would like to give you all a huge thank you for our amazing panelists for joining us tonight and sharing their experience, their knowledge, and their advice. Make sure to follow Pandonomics, Stayed Tuned El Paso, the Vino and Rae Show, and the Herald Post Friday night show, The End Zone. Make sure to subscribe on our website for our event updates for our next panel discussion and networking event. Thank you to Downtown Spaces for hosting this discussion. And my name is Katie Scott, and we'll see you at next month's panel discussion.
so this wasn't
Thank you.
rehearsal?
Thank
This
you.
was live.
This was
We're
live.
doing it right now.
Yeah, this is it.
We did good.
Well,